The station called Kepri 9 was never meant to be quiet. It was built as a transit hub at the edge of disputed space, always full of noise, engines humming, alien voices overlapping, warning lights flashing in steady rhythm. But now the sounds were wrong. Metal groaned under pressure. Distant explosions rolled through the structure like slow thunder. Emergency sirens wailed and then cut out, one by one, as power systems failed. Elia's ward ran through a half-lit corridor, boots striking sparks from the cracked floor panels. His rifle was slung over his shoulder, unused. There was no time to fight what hunted this place. Survival meant moving, hiding, waiting. Behind him, someone struggled to keep pace. Saraith was not built for running. Her long frame moved with careful grace even in danger, but exhaustion was catching her. The thin protective suit she wore was torn along one arm, darkening with leaked coolant from a damaged regulator. Her breathing was uneven. Elias slowed without thinking. "This way," he said, pointing to a side passage as another tremor shook the station. She hesitated only a second before following him. Trust did not come easily to her species, especially toward humans, but the alternatives were worse. The station's security drones had gone hostile after the command network collapsed. Anything that moved alone did not survive long. They slipped into an access corridor barely wide enough for two. Elias sealed the hatch behind them and leaned against it, chest rising and falling hard. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Saraith said quietly, "You are injured." Elias looked down at his side. Blood soaked through his uniform, dark and sticky. He had not noticed when it happened. Adrenaline had a way of hiding pain. "I've been worse," he replied. That was not entirely true. They moved deeper into the corridor, following flickering emergency lights until Elias found what he was looking for, an old medical quarters decommissioned years ago. The door resisted, then slid open with a tired hiss. Inside, the room was small, too small. One damaged console blinked weakly in the corner. A cabinet lay open, empty. At the center of the room was a single medical sleep pod, its surface cracked but intact. Everything else had been stripped long ago. Saraith stopped just inside the doorway. "There is only one bed," she said. Elias let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. "Figures." He stepped aside. "You take it." Her eyes, large, reflective, and far too calm for the situation, focused on him. "I will not." "You're hurt," he said, "and your suit's failing." "So is your body," she replied. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Another tremor rattled the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly as environmental control failed. Elias felt it immediately. Saraith stiffened. Her species relied on external regulation to maintain body heat. Cold was dangerous for her. She looked at the pod again, then at Elias. "There is only one bed," she repeated, slower this time. Elias understood. "Okay," he said after a moment. "We share it just for warmth." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then nodded once. They approached the pod carefully as if it might object. Elias helped her climb in first. The pod was narrow, designed for a single patient. When he joined her, there was no space between them. Saraith tensed instantly. Elias kept his movements slow and deliberate. He positioned himself so his injured side faced outward, not touching her. He could feel the cold through the thin walls of the pod. Her body temperature was already dropping. The pod systems flickered, then stabilized at minimal power. For a while, neither spoke. Outside the room, something heavy passed by, its mechanical steps echoing through the corridor. Elias held his breath until the sound faded. Saraith finally spoke, her voice low. "Humans are said to dislike confined spaces." "Some do," Elias said. "Some don't." She considered that. "You are not afraid." "I am," he replied honestly, "just trying not to show it." That answer surprised her. She shifted slightly, then froze, clearly aware of how close they were. Her people avoided physical contact unless necessary. This was far beyond what she considered acceptable. Yet, The cold eased. Her internal sensors adjusted. His body heat was strong, steady. It compensated for her failing suit better than expected. "Your species generates excessive thermal output," she said. Elias smiled faintly. "We run warm." Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt strange in the quiet. Elias stayed awake. He forced himself to. His eyes burned and pain pulsed in his side with every breath. Still, he watched the door, listened for danger. Saraith noticed. "You should rest," she said. "Later. You will lose consciousness if you do not. Then wake me if that happens." She studied his face. Humans showed emotion openly. Fatigue, pain, determination, it was all there. No layered masks, no controlled expressions. It was unsettling and comforting. Her people valued efficiency over endurance. They withdrew when injured, relied on systems, waited for recovery. Elias did not wait. He stayed alert despite his wounds. Slowly, without planning to, she moved closer. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it brought her shoulder against his chest. Elias stiffened slightly, then relaxed. He did not pull away. "I apologize," she said quickly. "The temperature—" "It's fine," he said. "Stay warm." She felt his heartbeat under her palm, strong, steady. Human hearts were loud, she realized. Hard to ignore. Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. The lights dimmed, then steadied. "Elias Ward," she said. "Yes. If we do not survive this station," he waited. "Your actions will be recorded accurately," she finished. "I will ensure that." He gave a tired smile. "Thanks." Silence returned. Saraith's thoughts drifted despite herself. She remembered her training. Humans were unpredictable, emotion-driven, dangerous allies, but also stubborn, protective, willing to suffer quietly so others did not have to. Her breathing slowed as warmth spread through her limbs. Outside, Kepri 9 continued to die. Inside the small room, two very different beings lay in a single bed, held together not by comfort, not by desire, but by the simple need to survive. And for the first time since the evacuation began, neither felt completely alone. The station did not sleep. Even in the false quiet, Kepri 9 groaned and shifted like a wounded creature. Metal stretched. Old seals hissed as pressure changed. Somewhere far away, something exploded, and the sound traveled through the walls long after the fire was gone. Elias felt it all. He lay half awake in the narrow medical pod, his mind refusing rest. Pain throbbed in his side, sharp and constant now that the rush had faded. He kept one hand near his rifle, the other still, careful not to move too much. Saraith slept. At least he thought she did. Her breathing was slower, more even than before. Her body was warmer now, the dangerous chill pushed back by shared heat. She lay close enough that he could feel the rise and fall of her chest against his own. Humans were used to closeness. Crowded transports, tight bunks, shared shelters during long deployments. Elias had slept shoulder to shoulder with other soldiers more times than he could count. This was different. Not uncomfortable, just different. A faint vibration passed through the pod. Elias' eyes snapped open fully. He listened, counting the seconds between sounds. There it was again, a low mechanical hum closer than before. Drones. He shifted carefully, just enough to angle his head toward the door. The pod creaked softly. Saraith stirred. Her eyes opened at once. "You heard it too," she said quietly. "Yeah. How many?" "Hard to say." The hum grew louder, then paused. Red light swept under the door, thin and searching. Saraith's muscles tensed. Her species reacted quickly to threat, bodies coiling like springs. Instinct urged her to pull away, to create distance. Instead, she stayed where she was. If the drone breached the room, movement would give them away. They waited. Seconds stretched. Elias slowed his breathing, forcing his body into stillness despite the pain screaming in his side. Sweat gathered on his brow. The light shifted, moved on. The hum faded. Only then did Elias let out a breath. Saraith did not move away. She remained close, her hand still pressed lightly against his chest. You remained conscious, she said. Barely. You should have rested. Couldn't risk it. Her fingers flexed slightly, feeling the strong rhythm beneath her palm. Human hearts were inefficient, she had been taught. Too fast, too loud, a weakness. Yet that sound had kept her calm when the drone passed. She withdrew her hand slowly. You place yourself at risk for others, she said. It was not a question. Elias shrugged as much as the tight space allowed. Kind of the job. That is an inadequate explanation. He smiled faintly. It's the only one I've got. The temperature dropped again, not as sharply as before, but enough for Saraith to notice. Her skin cooled, suit regulators straining. Without comment, Elias shifted closer, adjusting the thin thermal blanket around them. She did not resist. Instead, she adjusted too, aligning herself so heat transferred more efficiently. It was a practical choice, a logical one. At least that was what she told herself. Time passed in uneven pieces, short conversations broken by silence, long stretches of listening. Eventually, Elias' body betrayed him. His breathing changed, growing shallow. His grip on the rifle loosened. His head dipped forward slightly. Saraith noticed at once. Elias, she whispered. No response. She stiffened, fear flashing through her calm exterior. She placed 2 fingers against his neck, checking his pulse. It was still strong, though faster than normal. He had lost consciousness. Her training urged immediate action. Stabilize, alert medical teams, activate emergency protocols. None of those were possible. She was alone with an unconscious human in a dying station. Saraith adjusted her position, supporting him so he did not slump awkwardly. She felt the heat of him fully now, steady and alive. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest properly. When Elias woke, he did not know how much time had passed. His head felt heavy, his thoughts slow. He was aware first of warmth, then of weight against him. He froze. Saraith was awake, watching him. You fainted, she said calmly. Did I? His voice was rough. Yes. For approximately 26 minutes. He winced. Sorry about that. You are injured, it was expected. He tried to shift away, embarrassed, but pain flared, stealing his breath. He clenched his jaw, refusing to make a sound. Saraith noticed anyway. You should not move, she said. Kind of hard not to. She hesitated, then reached out, placing her hand against his side, not on the wound, but near it, steadying him. Remain still, she said. I will monitor you. Elias nodded slowly. Thanks. She withdrew her hand after a moment, but stayed close. Another alarm echoed through the station, distorted and weak. A recorded voice repeated evacuation orders in 3 languages, none of them helpful now. Saraith looked toward the ceiling. The station's core is destabilizing. How long? Unknown, hours, perhaps less. Rescue? Possible, uncertain. Elias absorbed that quietly. He had faced worse odds. Still, the idea of dying here in a forgotten corner of space did not sit well. We'll find a way, he said. She studied him. You speak with confidence that exceeds logic. Yeah, he admitted, humans do that. Her lips curved slightly, a subtle expression rarely seen by outsiders. It is reassuring. The word surprised both of them. They shared a brief, quiet moment, broken by a sudden impact nearby. The wall shook violently. Something crashed in the corridor outside. Elias swore under his breath. That's close. The door began to glow faintly as cutting tools engaged from the other side. Drone or scavenger unit, Saraith said. Either will detect life signs. Elias forced himself upright despite the pain. He raised his rifle, bracing it as best he could. Saraith watched him, then made a decision. She activated the last function in her damaged suit, diverting all remaining power to her neural interface. Her eyes glowed faintly, not bright, not dramatic, just enough to show the strain. What are you doing? Elias asked. Masking our signatures, she replied. It will not last long. The door hissed as a thin line burned through it. Metal peeled back. They waited. Seconds passed. The cutting stopped. Heavy footsteps retreated. Seraph exhaled slowly and slumped slightly as her suit powered down. Elias caught her before she could fall. "Easy," he said. "I've got you." She leaned against him, weaker now than before. Her temperature dropped rapidly. "You expended too much energy," he said. "It was necessary." Still. He adjusted the blanket again, pulling her close without asking. This time she did not tense at all. Her head rested against his shoulder. "You protected me," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Fair's fair." She closed her eyes, trusting him to keep watch again. As the station continued its slow collapse, the line between necessity and choice began to blur. And somewhere deep within Sarath's ordered mind, a quiet realization took shape. Humans were not strong because they were fearless. They were strong because they stayed close, even when everything told them to pull away. The room shook so hard that dust fell like rain. Elias reacted first. He tightened his hold around Sarath as the medical pod jolted, metal screaming somewhere deep in the station's bones. The lights flickered, went dark, then returned in a weak red glow. "That was not structural failure," Sarath said, her voice tight. "That was an impact." Elias nodded, already reaching for his rifle. Something big just hit the station. Another tremor followed, closer this time. The floor tilted slightly, enough that loose debris slid across the room. Sarath pushed herself upright, fighting dizziness. Her suit was nearly drained. Every movement cost effort. "We cannot remain here," she said. "Agreed," Elias replied, "but moving won't be easy." Outside the room, heavy metal scraped against metal. The sound carried intent. Whatever was out there was not wandering, it was hunting. Elias slid out of the pod slowly, gritting his teeth as pain flared in his side. His vision blurred for a moment, then cleared. He forced his breathing steady. Sarath followed, less steady than before. She caught the wall with one hand. Elias noticed immediately. "Lean on me." She hesitated. Her culture resisted dependency. But the station shook again and the choice was taken from her. She placed her arm around his shoulders. He supported more of her weight than he admitted. They moved to the door and listened. Heavy steps approached, then stopped. A harsh mechanical sound followed. Scanning. Sarath closed her eyes, focusing. Her neural interface sparked weakly, just enough to give her a sense of the machine outside. Large, armored, military-grade, not station security. "A salvage hunter," she whispered. "They harvest survivors." Elias' jaw tightened. "Not today." The door buckled inward under a sudden blow. Metal warped. Another hit followed, stronger. Elias raised his rifle and fired through the weakening panel. The shot echoed painfully loud in the small room. Sparks flew outside. The machine responded instantly. The door tore free, crashing inward. The hunter filled the doorway, tall and broad, its surface scarred from old battles. Red sensors locked onto them. Elias fired again. The shot glanced off heavy armor. "Move," he shouted. They ran. The corridor beyond was chaos. Panels torn away, gravity fluctuating in waves. Emergency lights flickered like dying stars. The hunter followed, heavy steps shaking the floor. Elias led them into a maintenance junction and slammed a manual hatch shut behind them. He sealed it just as a powerful strike hit the other side. The hatch bent inward. "That will not hold," Sarath said. "I know." Elias scanned the junction. Old conduit lines. A vertical access shaft leading down into darkness. "No choice," he said. "We go down." Sarath looked into the shaft. "There is no power below. Then we don't stop." He went first, gripping the ladder and lowering himself carefully. Pain threatened to pull him into darkness, but he held on. Sarath followed, slower, her limbs weaker now. Elias kept one hand ready beneath her in case she slipped. The hatch above exploded inward. Metal screamed. They climbed faster. The shaft shook violently as the hunter tried to force its way in. Halfway down, the ladder gave way. Elias felt it before he saw it. The rung snapped under Sarath's hand. She fell. Elias lunged without thinking, releasing the ladder and grabbing her wrist. The sudden weight tore a cry from his throat. His injured side burned like fire. They swung together, hanging over open darkness. For a heartbeat, everything froze. "Release me," Saraith said. "What?" Elias gasped. "You cannot support both of us. You will fall." "No," he said. "I've got you." She looked at him, truly looked at him. His face was pale, strained, but his grip did not loosen. "This is not logical," she said softly. "Good," he replied. "I'm bad at logical." The ladder above groaned. Another rung cracked. Saraith made a decision. She reached up with her free hand and pressed something against his arm. Her last emergency injector. A surge of stimulant hit Elia's system, sharp and painful, forcing strength into failing muscles. Before he could react, she twisted her wrist free and dropped. "Saraith!" he shouted. She fell into the darkness, her form swallowed by shadow. The ladder snapped fully. Elias barely managed to cling to the remaining structure, hauling himself down with shaking arms. He climbed blindly, driven by panic and pain, until his boots hit solid ground. He fell to his knees, gasping. The shaft opened into a lower engineering level, long abandoned. The air was cold and still. "Saraith!" he shouted again. Silence answered. Then weakly, "Here." He turned, heart slamming against his ribs. She lay several meters away, tangled in broken cables. Her suit was torn badly now, systems failing, but she was alive. Elias crawled to her side, ignoring the pain screaming through his body. "You stupid!" His voice broke. He swallowed hard. "Don't do that again." She managed a faint, uneven expression that might have been humor. "You are alive. That was the objective." He helped her sit up, supporting her fully now. Her body was cold again, too cold. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "I know," she replied. "That is why I acted." Above them, the shaft echoed with metal tearing. The hunter was forcing its way down. Elias looked around desperately. The engineering level stretched into darkness, but one section showed faint power readings on his wrist display. "There," he said. "Emergency core room." They moved as fast as they could, half walking, half dragging. Every step felt heavier than the last. The hunter dropped into the shaft behind them with a thunderous crash. It was faster than it looked. Elias pushed Saraith ahead. "Go, I'll slow it down." She grabbed his arm. "No, I can handle it." "You cannot," she said flatly. The machine charged. Saraith stepped forward, drawing on the last fragments of her neural power. The air seemed to tighten around her as she focused everything she had. The hunter staggered mid-step, systems fighting external interference. Elias seized the moment. He fired point-blank into exposed joints again and again until the rifle clicked empty. The machine collapsed in a shower of sparks, thrashing violently before going still. Silence fell, broken only by their breathing. Elias dropped the rifle and caught Saraith as she sagged. Her eyes fluttered. "Stay with me," he said urgently. "My energy is depleted," she whispered. "My core temperature is falling rapidly." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her without hesitation. He pressed his body against hers, sharing heat, ignoring everything else. "You're not dying," he said. "Not here," she leaned into him weakly. "If I do, I regret nothing." "You're not allowed to say that," he replied. "We still have a future argument about it." A faint sound escaped her, almost a laugh. Lights flared suddenly across the chamber. Bright white, a voice echoed through the space, clear and human. "This is Alliance Rescue Team 7. We have life signs." Elias closed his eyes, relief crashing over him so hard his hands shook. He held Saraith tighter as medics rushed toward them. Later, as they were carried onto the rescue transport, wrapped in blankets and stabilizers, Saraith turned her head slightly toward Elias. "You stayed," she said. "Always," he answered. And for the first time since she had met him, she believed that word completely. The shuttle hummed steadily as it cut through the darkness of space, carrying survivors from Kepri 9 back to Alliance Command. The station was now little more than a drifting husk, fragments of metal and fire trailing behind it like a dying comet. Outside the viewport, stars blinked indifferently, as if the chaos below had never existed. Elias sat in the cramped medbay of the transport, his injuries stabilized but still tender. His side ached with every breath, and his ribs reminded him that he had survived through luck and stubbornness, not skill alone. He flexed his fingers, waiting for the dull pain to settle, while his eyes wandered over the small cabin. Rows of stretchers lined the walls, occupied by humans, aliens, and those who had narrowly escaped the station's collapse. It was a quiet mix of relief and exhaustion. Saraith was nearby, still monitored by Alliance medics, her breathing steady but shallow. Her suit had been repaired temporarily, enough to maintain basic life support, but she was weak. Her eyes, sharp and luminous even under the dim cabin lights, followed him wherever he moved. Elias noticed and smiled faintly. She did not need to speak for him to feel the unspoken acknowledgement between them, a bond formed in fire, blood, and shared danger. He hesitated, unsure if he should speak first. The human way, he reminded himself. Sometimes saying what was on your mind mattered more than calculating the consequences. "You held your own," he said quietly, kneeling beside her stretcher, "even when I almost lost it down there. You're strong." She tilted her head slightly, the faintest of smiles crossing her face. "You humans exaggerate bravery. What you call strength is often simple stubbornness." "Maybe," he admitted with a wry smile, "but stubbornness works in situations like that. I think your species should try it sometime." Saraith regarded him carefully, her gaze analytical but softened by something he could not name. She had observed humans for years, studied their habits, their mistakes, and their unexpected resilience. Yet something about this one human, one soldier who was far from perfect, had changed her understanding. He fought not for glory, not for medals, but for people, for survival, for others. It was unorthodox, illogical by her species' standards, but effective. "You risked yourself for me," she said softly, almost as if testing the words in her mouth. "It was unnecessary." He shook his head. "Not unnecessary, you stayed with me too. That counts." Her eyes flicked to his chest, then back to his face. The subtle heat radiating from him, even in the controlled environment of the shuttle, reminded her of the cramped medbay on the station, the warmth that had saved her when her body could not regulate itself, the warmth that made her forget distance, hesitation, and fear. "You are persistent," she said finally, almost as a statement, not a question. "And you're surprisingly cooperative when it counts," he replied. They both chuckled softly. For a brief moment, the trauma and chaos fell away, leaving only the quiet space between them. Outside the medbay, the transport systems maintained course toward the Alliance command ship, a towering vessel with lights that promised safety, medical care, and the chance to rest without constant fear. Elias imagined the command center's debrief, the reports and the questions, and he thought about how Saraith would answer them, calm, precise, measured. The shuttle rocked lightly as it passed through residual debris fields. Elias shifted, careful of his injuries, and found himself glancing at her again. She was observing him now, too, head tilted slightly as though measuring his every move. There was no need for words. They understood each other in ways words could not convey. Hours passed. The journey felt longer than it should have. Time and space was deceptive, stretched by the body's need for recovery and the mind's fixation on danger. But eventually, the shuttle docked with the command ship. Rescue teams met them immediately, moving quickly to transfer the injured to proper medical facilities. Elias supported Saraith as she was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, his hand lingering for a moment at her side. "We're almost there," he said softly. She met his gaze, her large eyes reflecting the dim lighting of the docking bay. "Almost," she agreed. "You humans, you behave unpredictably, yet your methods often succeed." He smiled, trying to ignore the ache in his ribs. "That's the plan." The medical teams guided them through sterile hallways and into a large triage area filled with equipment, monitors, and trained personnel. Aliens from multiple species moved about, tending to those who had survived, stabilizing wounds and administering treatment. Elias was directed to a bed for further care, while Saraith was taken to a specialized section for alien physiology. Even in the chaos, their connection persisted. The humans and aliens surrounding them might have been strangers, but the two of them shared something no one else understood. The memory of the station's collapse, the danger they had faced together, and the choices made in those moments. When the medics finished preliminary checks, Elias requested permission to stay nearby. The commander raised an eyebrow but nodded. "You've earned the right to be here," he said. "Don't get in the way." He settled into a chair near Saraith's bed. She was resting, though not asleep. Her eyes followed him. "You stayed close during the station collapse," she said quietly, breaking the silence. He nodded. "And I'll stay close now. Doesn't mean I like hospitals, but I can handle sitting." "Humans," she began, then paused, searching for the words. "There is comfort in your proximity. It is unusual." Elias smiled faintly. "Comfort is good, comfort is necessary, helps you think, keeps you alive." She tilted her head, considering. "I do not require comfort. My species relies on efficiency. Survival is calculated. Emotion is optional." "Yeah, well," he said, "humans aren't always logical either. Sometimes we survive because we care, not because we plan." The corners of her mouth lifted, a subtle gesture that conveyed more than words could. "Perhaps your species has merits beyond my previous understanding." Their quiet conversation was interrupted by a team of analysts entering the room. They needed Saraith's report. They asked questions about the station, the drones, and the salvage hunter that had pursued them. Saraith answered methodically, precise, and unemotional, almost robotic. Elias watched her. He noticed small things she did not even think about. The way she adjusted her position when she thought he might be cold, the way she monitored his injuries without being prompted, the faint way her gaze lingered on him. When the team left, she let out a quiet sigh, leaning back into her bed. Elias noticed the subtle slump of exhaustion, the strain her controlled exterior could not hide. "You pushed yourself far too much," he said. "I could not allow you to face the machine alone," she replied simply. "You didn't have to," he said, "but I'd do the same for you." She looked at him, expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "You are persistent and protective. And you're alive," he said. "Which is enough for me." The days that followed were quiet, almost peaceful. Medical teams stabilized injuries, systems aboard the command ship repaired themselves, and the survivors began to recover. Yet despite the controlled environment, danger was never far from their minds. The memory of the station's collapse lingered, a reminder that life could change in an instant. Elias and Saraith spent those days together, not because they had to, but because neither wanted to be anywhere else. They shared quiet meals, brief walks through the ship's corridors, and long periods of silent companionship. Words were unnecessary. Their experiences had built a bridge that transcended language and culture. One evening, as the artificial night cycle dimmed lights to simulate rest periods, Saraith moved to sit closer to Elias on a bench in the medbay corridor. He looked at her, surprised. "You may sit," he said. "Space is limited, but there's room here." She did, leaning slightly against him. Not for warmth, not for need, but for presence, for trust. "You humans," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "You survive differently than I expected, by proximity, by closeness. By willingness to share risk and comfort simultaneously." "Yeah," Elias said quietly. "Sometimes that's what it takes." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Both had faced death together. Both had seen the fragility of life. And both had learned that survival was not just about strength, weapons, or planning. It was about trust. Months later, after full recovery, the two were assigned to a joint mission on a distant planet. Reports of environmental collapse and hostile alien forces demanded cooperation between species. Saraith walked beside Elias as they boarded the transport shuttle, no longer tentative, no longer afraid of closeness. The Alliance Command debrief praised both for their survival and ingenuity. Analysts were baffled by the seamless cooperation between human and alien, recording it as a case study in interspecies survival. Saraith submitted her official report with one note that would quietly circulate through command channels. Human proximity increases survival probability. Elias caught the note later, reading it quietly. He smiled. She moved beside him not because the shuttle forced them together, but because she chose to. And he knew without words that he would always protect her. Above them, stars stretched into infinity. The universe was vast, indifferent, and often dangerous. Yet here, in a small corner of a transport shuttle, two beings, different in every way but bound by shared struggle, understood something that few others did. Survival was strongest when fear was replaced with trust, and trust was strongest when it was shared. Elias adjusted his arm to support her better, and she leaned against him with a quiet, steady confidence. Outside the viewport, space continued its endless journey. Inside, humanity and understanding had carved a small but unbreakable corner of safety, warmth, and resilience. And for the first time, Saraith allowed herself to believe that some dangers could be met not alone, but together.